I do work with Muslims. Actually, again, God used Brad to call me. I didn't know what a Muslim was. I mean, I'm from rural Mississippi. You know where Mississippi is, right? Again.
It's about 10 miles from.
Okay. So I live across the border, about an hour and 15 minutes south of here. I grew up there and was born and raised and all that kind of thing. But, Islam has come on the U.S. stage since 9/11. And so I actually didn't know anything about Islam and called up the IMB, International Mission Board, and just said, hey, I think God's calling me. I was in a Bible study at Mississippi College and with my wife, and she was not my wife. I just met her in there, and God used my wife to call me to missions, actually. And so or overseas mission. And so then called up the board, IMB, and then there was a girl that had worked with Brad, and she said, hey, I know somewhere you can go. So I ended up living in Brad's house for 3 months. That was great. But I didn't know anything about Islam. Actually, on the plane going over to India, I read some material that Brad had sent. LAMP, Lower Asian Muslim People. I watched a really great VHS video when we got there, and I still remember it. And so after, I don't know, we'd been there maybe 4 or 5 days. Gretchen wasn't even back yet. Gretchen was gone. Actually, when we got to Brad's house, no one was there. David Doss, his friend, dropped us off at his house. And so we were there, and then Brad showed up, and Gretchen had not made it back yet. And then they blew up the Trade Center, like 9/11 happened, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 days after we reached Brad's house. So I watched the towers come down from Brad's living room, and it was awful, right? I mean, but man, God really used that time to just clarify, like, that's what I need to do. And again, Islam was not, I didn't know anything about Muslims or Islam. It wasn't popular, no one knew anything about it. The only thing I knew about Islam was from watching Rambo 3. If you watch Rambo, First Blood 3, they fights the Muslims in Afghanistan, all that kind of stuff. That's all I knew about it. And but since then, God changed my heart and burdened for them, and I see now Him working even in that, because now Islam is so influential. It's growing. 1 out of every 7 people in the world is a Muslim. They're everywhere, and so we need to, as the church, know how to interact with them and not shun them and put them to the side. And we are. I don't want to make a generalization. There are definitely people in the church, but as a whole, I don't think the church in America is equipped to reach them. I could be wrong. Brad can speak to this. He's living here. I don't meet a lot of Christians in America that are actively seeking to reach Muslims. They might tolerate them, and there's a difference. Like, you may go to a restaurant like I did at Panera Bread yesterday, and I walked into Panera Bread. I think I told them the whole family of women came in, like 8 Muslim women just sat down right beside me. I wanted to talk to them, but they're women. That was kind of inappropriate for Muslim women. Like, they were all women, so here I was, a single guy. Hey, you want to chat? It would have just been weird. But they're there. There's Muslims everywhere. And I see people tolerating Islam or hating Islam. And I hate Islam. Let me be clear. It is from Satan, but I love Muslims. Islam is evil. It's not peaceful, it's not good. There's nothing, I don't look at Islam and, oh, yeah, it's just it's not. But I love Muslims, and they need to be freed from that. So God used all of those instances in my life. And so when I'm in the States, I hope to do 2 things. One, help believers here know how to not just tolerate Muslims, but actively engage them. And there's a big difference. And again, brother, I don't know what you've heard or not, so sorry about that. But I do think this is important. You know, you said you knew where Mississippi is, where it's just right there. Like, so I'm in Tippah County, which is on the line. And so I went to Tippah Benton Association, and I said, hey, I'm here. This was my last STOS. This was 3 years ago. And I said, hey, Tippah Benton Association, you got all these churches here. You got Muslims coming in. I mean, there's Yemenis Muslims, there's Middle Eastern Muslims, and they're living here. And so I asked them, could we come and just talk about how to do some basic sharing with Muslims? And they said, yeah. And there are lots of people there that were tolerant, and they were like, yeah, that's good. I'm sure glad you're reaching those Muslims. But there was only 2 or 3 that were actively like, I want to learn how to do this. And there were 2 or 3. And so I focused on those 3. Still have a relationship with that guy. His name's Jeff Hill, and he's doing a good job trying to reach. There was another lady. She was in her late 70s then, so she may be over 80 now. There's a group of Yemenis Muslims living in Union County. And so there's so many of them that this small rural school has started an ESL program for those Yemenis girls that are going to that school. And so, but she told me, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know what to do here. So I want to help those that want to do it with my time. And then encourage the rest of you to really be an advocate for it, because at that same Benton Tipple, while there was most people just like came in and left and 2 or 3 were wanting to be excited about it, there were several that were, we don't want to do this. And one guy even said, well, you're wasting, like he stood up and said, like, I don't want to be the only one here to say it, but why are we wasting our time with Muslims? They're just going to blow us up. And I said, well, they could, but I felt like that was honestly like a good scenario. Like we approach many times, people are very much, well, I'll do that if it doesn't bring me any risk. And I think you have to throw that out. I don't think you can truly follow Christ with the, well, I'll follow Jesus if I can guarantee I'm not going to get hurt. You can't do that. They might blow you up. So I'm not going to come say you, well, they're not. I don't think they're going to blow you up. I think that's a really small risk. What I told to do this, and I'm in Memphis now, but at that time they had like 8 different shootings in Memphis during my last stops, during my time. And I said, dude, how often do you go to Memphis and shop? He said, well, I go pretty regular. I said, well, I think I got a better chance of making it out than you do, to be perfectly honest. Like, I think your chance of getting shot in Memphis is higher than me being attacked and shot by a Muslim. I don't mean to be rude about it, but I think if I run the stats, I'm feeling pretty good about that. And so I think we need to take those fears, put them into reality, and say, well, even if I do, then we need to engage them. And so I'm hoping that there is a stronger desire from especially this seminary to be awareness about Muslims. You have Brad. Brad has worked with Muslims for years. He knows about Islam. So you've got someone that can help you out. So I want to encourage you to do that because there's a huge need in this area. So watching my time, I am Baptist, so sometimes I go over and then you hear it's always fun. It's like every pastor, they'll go over like 15 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry I went over. Well, you did last week. You go over every time, so don't even say you're sorry anymore. So I actually try to watch my time, and you know you're doing it. Don't act like you. And what's really funny about it is that they'll ask the congregation, "I'm sorry, but I need 5 more minutes. Is that okay? When is the congregation? No, actually, could you shut up? I got an NFL game to go watch." They're not going to do that, so it's kind of pointless.
I wouldn't be surprised if they do.
Well, they might, under their breath, man. I really wish you'd shut up. I really got to go. The Packers are playing. But I want to be respectful of the time, but I also want to make use of it. And at any point, just ask me a question. You want to offend me? Believe me, I've heard enough stuff. I live in India. People say stuff all the time that are offensive, so I've just accepted it. I do have 4 children. My first child's son, my son was born in Indonesia with Blake, and Brad was there. That was a pretty tough time, but it was actually really good. It was our first child, so Melissa and I didn't know what to expect. And so it was really traumatic. And so we thought that was just the way things were supposed to go. When we had our daughter in Texas, we were like, oh, they weren't supposed to do that back then. So Melissa had a C-section. Blake was in really bad stress. He almost died, actually. But they did a C-section and got him out. My wife had a lot of repercussions from that, from depression, like postpartum, those type of things. Gretchen helped my wife get through that. That was really good. Actually, she still has to struggle with it every now and then. Not with depression like normal, but like once you have those hormone imbalance, like it still comes back from time to time. But we work through that, and that's part of it. My other 2 daughters are born in Texas. My last daughter was a surprise. We were finished. We were really finished, like precautionary finished. And God said, no, here's another daughter. So I have another one. She was born in Chennai, and I can't imagine life without her. Her name's Allie. So we do have all those 4. You do have to kind of grow some skin. My wife was pregnant. I told you she already struggles with a little bit of that postpartum and a little depression stuff with the hormones. But it was never ending with this last child, with Allie. People would walk up to it, Melissa, on a daily basis. Oh, you're so fat and dull. Like, well, that's not helping, just so you know, like when you call it. they didn't even think anything about it. Like, why would you call her dull? Because she, you're just tired. Like, pregnant women are tired. You're fat and dull today, Miss. Okay, well, no, anyway. So you got to build some tough skin with that. But I'll go ahead and do this. Well, let me ask you this. Is there anything specific? Because I know my brother here has heard 3 different things. I have not been in the class with yet. Before I even talk about what I might say about Islam, or as far as what I've been doing is, okay, this is who I want you to focus on. I really am trying to, for a lack of a better word, recruit you. Like, I really would love to see Mid-America really embrace South Asia, and even specifically, if you look at this sheet of paper, there's a group on here called the Kerala Muslim, and they're actually called the Mapula, and I want to get to those. But before I do, anything specific you want to know about Islam, India? I can talk about Hinduism. It's predominantly Hindu. I just focus on Muslims. But I can answer anything, and if I don't know, Brad can probably help me out with it. Any questions you want? I just want to give you the chance.
In your experience, what do you think is more effective when you're sharing the gospel? What used to be effective with them? We have Muslim in Mozambique where I live, and we have Muslim here.
Yeah.
But I keep changing the strategy to share the gospel with them, and sometimes they don't feel like I'm going anywhere with them.
What have you tried before, or what has been your approach before?
Well, I do straightforward sharing the gospel, just go Roman road or anything else.
Okay.
And showing Jesus' love, like you say, try to understand their culture, try to find some bridges on their culture to share the gospel.
Okay.
But I never get any Muslim saved.
Yeah.
With all those strategies. And I always see some kind of, okay, I'm hearing you, but I'm not interested. That's the response I always got from the Muslim.
Okay.
And we have like a girls club, and they even mock Jesus on the cross and in our face.
Yeah.
And sometimes very disrespectful, and
Yeah.
I always be loving and sharing and keeping, but sometimes I say, we are going anywhere with those. And
I think that's great because you basically explained how every Christian most of the time feels with Muslims. And I think that's a major, if you could just record what you said and play it, I think that's why you have very few people working with Muslims, at least one major, because they are. Now the question is, and again, most of what I know, everything I know comes from Scripture, and if I don't know it from Scripture, if it's something outside of that, then I probably learned it from Brad. So like, if I don't know it again, or if you hear me say something, just say, hey, that's not the way I did it. But here's what I would say. I think for one of all, first we're talking about the glory of God. So I would encourage you to say, you never know who's going to listen. You never know. And even the people that are mocking and whatever, you're sowing seeds on hard ground. Now, it is very possible. We don't know who has received seed and when and where. And so you could walk up to, I have seen this in India with Muslims. A Muslim hear the gospel for the first time, believe it and accept it. Very rare, but it happens. I've also seen where people have to lay the groundwork for a long time. The vast majority, they hear the gospel, and there continues to be dialogue. It typically takes, in our Tamil Nadu area, and I think for most Muslims, 1.5 to 2 years. That's typical and average. And you say, why? And that really comes down for us because, like, do I really want to spend? I don't think that means spending every day with them. I do think that they need a constant reminder and laying it before them to know you're not really going to give up on this, that this is significant and this is important. And there's a combination. Some people say, well, I just want to do relationship evangelism. I don't do relationship evangelism. I do relational evangelism. The difference with that is I'm not going to talk to someone for 6 months before I get to the gospel. That means I'm saving them. The gospel can save them. So being direct. However, if I am relational, it will lead to a relationship. If I can. Now, you can't be best friends with everyone either. Like, I'm not going to, on the guy on a plane or Starbucks or wherever they are, if I can share the gospel, I'm going to do it if I can. I don't think I can't be I can't disciple that every time. So I'm going to have to leave that to the Lord. But the ones that I can, I'm going to. I'll give you one example. The guy, I was young. I was 22 then. So there was a guy named Abdul, and he helped me in India when I was with Brad, 2001. Man, I'm 39. He's 36. He was younger than me now. I am still sharing with this guy. But I was away from him for 14 years. I called him up when I got back to India. I said, man, it's been a long time. Let's get together. He said, yeah, of course. And we have had some incredible conversations in the past year. I flew to Bangalore 3 times, and every time I went, hey, can we meet? Every time, yes. And every time it got deeper and deeper. And the last time he said, I'm not prepared to answer really what you're saying, but I don't really like a lot of what I believe. I don't really understand what I believe. It's just what I've been told. That's what he was telling me. But that's taken time to get there. So I wish I could say there's not a one answer thing. I would say sow the gospel widely, keep doing what you're doing, but be committed to go back and don't be discouraged. And ultimately, if my friend Abdul dies and goes to hell, I still rejoice that he heard the gospel. Like, I'll be extremely sad, but I don't think that sharing with Muslims, even if they reject, is in vain, because it demonstrates the glory of God. Like, He welcomed them in. Did they reject it? Yeah. But God was glorified in our service and our faithfulness to Him. And I think people get discouraged when they share and they work with Muslims and they're, I didn't do anything. You were faithful, and God was honored in that. And I don't know about you, but in the midst of those, God has grown me a lot. Like my relationship, because it's an interaction with Christ. So when I'm sharing the gospel, I'm not just checking a box. I'm going in His Spirit. I'm serving with Him. And so even the process of proclaiming the gospel is strengthening me in my faith. So when you see them people mocking you and mocking what you're saying, there's number one, the hope that they come to faith. And number two, your faith will be strengthened. And so don't limit I hear this say, well, what kind of fruit do you see? I'm not seeing a lot of fruit with my eyes, but I'm being patient knowing that ultimately God has this. And then as I do this, I see Muslims come to faith, and I hear testimonies, and I see this, and I'm thinking, yeah, it was worth it. So be patient and keep doing it. Now, let me help you a little bit. So let's do this. 120. I brought this book. It's called Any Three. Also, if you look on your resources, and Brad and I agree, we didn't even talk about it, but we agree. Number one, read the Bible. Be a good reader of Scripture and really read it. Like, just go back and read through a gospel, read through Acts, and make notes. What do you see Jesus doing? And I think what you'll find, what do you see the apostles doing? What do you see Paul doing? And I think what you'll find is most of the things that people say for evangelism, well, I was in this past year. We were in church, and Francis of Assisi. I think if he was alive today, he would take this back. It's very common now. Well, preach the gospel. Use what? You know this saying? Preach the gospel and
Use words if necessary.
yeah, that is awful.
He didn't say that.
Who
Never would have.
That's what I get these people.
Quote that all
They
the time.
quote that all the time. My church history says, that's why I said if he was here, I think he'd be upset, because I don't get that from that guy. Like, he was sharing, like, very open. Like, he even tried to help with contextualization. That's my understanding of this guy. People use it all the time. Why? Because they want an out. Well, quit being fearful. It's not you. You're not saving them. It's Jesus. We have got to mouth to ear get the gospel to people. So let's focus on Muslims for this few minutes, okay? So how do we do this? What you're doing is great. If you got the Romans road is the gospel. Do what you can, okay? I mean, it's not like saying, it's like, well, whatever. But what do you know about Islam? Do you know anything about it? Have you studied that yet? Or let me say, what are some basic ideas? Okay, well, I'll save all you've got in Islam. You have their beliefs and their practices. Their beliefs, like God, belief in Allah, one God, and angels and stuff. And then there's their practices, which is prayer and almsgiving and saying the confession and those things. Okay, but in the midst of that, they have 3 things that they learn about Christianity. Every Muslim, everywhere, anytime, knows there's these 3 things about Christians that they are taught. What are they? You may know. Do you remember? Did I tell this to you? Okay, then don't say anything because he's heard it twice. It's not fair. But then if they don't get it, then you'll have to. And then if you don't know it, then that'll make you feel really weird. So to save him the embarrassment of not knowing because he's supposed to know, what do you think?
All about the Americans are Christian.
They do think that. A lot of them think that. Indians think that. I've had a Muslim in Palavram, the guy where we were working. He said, when I told him that not all Christians in America, all Americans were Christians, because I brought him a friend of mine, and my friend was not a Christian. He was just a business guy. And when he found out that guy wasn't a Christian, he's like, how can this be? We really need to talk. It was a good inroads to a talk. But still, that's not what I'm going for, but it's true. So Muslims believe, I don't have to write this, I can just tell you. But number one, Muslims believe that Jesus is not God. Very basic core thing to Islam. Jesus is not God. Number two, Jesus didn't die on the cross. So even if he was God or whatever, no matter what he is, even if he wasn't God, he was a great prophet. Allah wouldn't let him die. He didn't die. So Jesus is not God. Jesus didn't die, and the Bible's corrupted. Those are the three things you need to know about Islam. Even before you learn all their beliefs, those are three things because they're going to be said. If I were to go visit your Muslim friends, that's what they would say. I guarantee it.
That's what they say.
Yeah, they all say it.
Especially that the Bible's corrupt.
Yeah.
And I always ask, where? Show me.
And do they show you? No.
Never.
This is not about logic. I literally, beyond a shadow of a doubt, in my brain, if I could sit down and talk to someone logical, I can dismantle Islam in 5 minutes. It's not hard. The Bible, like here you're studying in theology, like New Testament criticism and all these ways the Bible has been picked apart and formal criticism. We have said, here's the Bible, take it, pick it apart, and it still proves to be true. They don't do that with the Quran. They're scared of it because recently they did, and they've started to, and they're like, whoa, let's stop, because it's really easily shredded, and it doesn't make any sense. Now, you don't want to start your conversation like that. But what I would say is this is those three things. I think this is important. Actually, I learned this, Brad and Todd did this. I still like Jeff and Jennifer, so I haven't swapped yet, and I'm still think they would, but I think Jeff and Jennifer's good. But I'm not going to do that. But it's another little drawing. But can someone read or look up on your computer 1 Corinthians 15, 1 through 8? I use this all the time, and I think you'll see why you're having problems with your Muslim people pretty quickly. 1 Corinthians 15, 1 through 8. Just read that. In whatever language, I know it in English, but if you got another language.
Known to you, brethren, the gospel which I preached to you, which also you received, in which also you stand, by which also you are saved, if you hold fast to the word which I preached to you, unless you believed in vain. For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, and that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas and then to the 12. After that he appeared to more than 500 brethren at one time, most of whom remain until now, but some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles, and last of all, as to one untimely born, he appeared to me also.
Guys, that's the crux. Like, this is it. You got to know this. And a lot of Christians take this for granted. The whole world pivots on this. I mean, everything. I mean, your whole eternity, everything is focused on here. And Paul's saying, hey, what I preached to you, hold to it. This is it. And I think it's actually if you are taking Greek, when he says I preached to you, it's actually evangelion. It's the Greek verb of to evangelize, which is actually pretty cool because my Tamil people, they'll say, today I gospeled him, brother. Like, it's like, actually, you're pretty good translation. Like, you're actually translating that verse better. But here, what does it say? Okay, you got to remember this. You're never going to be too seminaried enough to not remember the core gospel. You're just not. If you go a day and don't work through the gospel in your mind, God, remind me of this, you're going to miss out. I don't care how many doctorates you have. You have to go back. Crucified. Paul says what? He was crucified for our sin, right there. He's saying, you got to know that. And then he what? After he was crucified, he was what? Resurrected. Okay. He was crucified and he was resurrected, and he died according to the what did it say? He died according to the gospel or the Scriptures. So this was ordained by God. Jesus didn't just happen. This whole plan was laid out from the very beginning, from the Scripture. So it was in the plan of God from history's past. But it wasn't like, and have you studied Hinduism, or these mystical things, like if you got Ganesh, or a lot of religions have these like, okay, this happened or this happened. But Paul's being real specific to say, how many people saw Jesus? 500 plus Cephas and all these other, James. He's saying, hey, there's eyewitnesses here. I'm not just making, Muhammad went into a cave and came out, hey, I heard from God. Actually, he didn't. He thought I got a jinn or something. But eventually he's like, hey, I heard from Allah. But eyewitnesses are important. And Paul's saying, go check this out. There's 500 people that saw him. He was crucified. The idea that Muslims say he wasn't crucified against the Roman government is ridiculous. Like the most guaranteed fact in all of human history is the crucifixion of Christ. Our whole time revolves around on it. I like to ask my Muslim friends that. Hey, what year is this? 2017. What does that celebrate? What's that? Oh yeah, like it's a fact. Like there's Jesus dying is a fact, and so you have witness testifying. Now, what did I tell you that Islam says about Christianity? What are the 3 things they believe about Jesus?
Jesus didn't die on the cross. Jesus is not God.
Okay, so he wasn't resurrected. He wasn't resurrected. He because he was God in the flesh, he was able to fully pay for our sin and thus be resurrected. If you die, you're dead. We're not God. Only he in the flesh can be resurrected from the dead. His divinity is proven in the resurrection. And what was the last one?
The Bible is corrupted.
So the very core of what we believe is the exact thing that Islam is attacking. And so when you're going to a Muslim and you're sharing the gospel, as soon as you get this out of your mouth, they've already been planning since birth to attack it. So it should not come it shouldn't be any shock to you when they start mocking or they start doing these things, because that's what they've been trained to do. As far as I know, Islam is the one religion that is directly built to oppose Christianity. The others oppose it. Hinduism opposes it. But Islam is built to do it. I mean, they're going after it. So here's the question: how do you get past it? So I'm going to give you one tool, and there's no way we can practice it and all that kind of stuff. So this is what I really encourage you to get the book, keep the conversation with Brad, go meet Muslims and talk. The only way you're going to learn how to do it is to meet people and go through it. But so those things, if you're going into a debate, or if you're having a conversation with someone and you know that there's certain things that are going to start the conflict, what should you do? If you want to talk to someone, but you know, if I talk about this, they're going to get angry, what would you do?
I pray about it.
You pray about it. Yeah, you should always pray about it. Well, if a good communicator would say, I know I want to get to the gospel, but I know that if I mention the word Bible up front, or resurrection up front, or death, they're going to be upset, but I need to get there. How do I do that? Okay, well, I guarantee you a Muslim only knows those 3 things. Well, not only those, but that's what they're ready to pounce on. But you know what they're not really prepared to do? Talk about other things within our Bible, especially the prophets or the Old Testament. So they believe in 3 books that come before. Does anyone know what those are? The Quran. They believe the Quran is the final word of God, which it's not, but for the sake of the Quran. And then there's 3 books they believe come before. Anyone want to guess what those are? All right. Well, I think someone whispered it. Torah, which is the books of Moses. Then the Zabur. These are Arabic words, but they'll know them. Torah, Zabur. If they don't know them, they should know them. And you can say, hey, you don't know those? And they usually go, oh, yeah. Yeah, I know those. They don't. But Torah, Zabur, these are the books, the Psalms, the books of David. And then the Injil. And this is the gospel. So the book of Isa, which is Jesus. And actually, I like to emphasize Isa al-Masih, Jesus the Messiah, because he's the only one in their Quran that actually has that title. Even Muhammad doesn't. He's just Muhammad Nabi, the Prophet Muhammad. Isa is the only one with that title, Jesus the Messiah. So I kind of like to drive that home too. When they say Isa Nabi, I say, actually it's Isa. Anyway, but these 3 books, so this is what I would do. I'm going to pretend, okay, that you're a Muslim. I'll just talk to you. So this is what this one-shot deal. But if you're recording it, you can do it. Get the book. So let's say that you walk up and you meet a Muslim. Anyone? What's a Muslim name? What would you think? Yeah. Yeah. So actually, I told this in the last class. This is what I do. I always meet Muhammad's, and so like that's a good starter for if you're a guy. You can say, "Hey, what's your name?" And he says, "Muhammad." You say, "Sir, give me a second name, please. I got 40 Muhammads in my phone. I can't keep that up." And they're like, "Yeah, that's right." And then they joke about it. It's good. I promise. I've never had anyone get mad. They're like, "Yeah, you're right. It's Muhammad Rafiq or Muhammad whatever." And it's okay, Rafiq. I'm just going to call you Rafiq so that we have a personal. It kind of makes it personal too. Then you're like, not everyone. So okay, Rafiq. Rafiq, have you ever heard of these books before? Have you read them? And he'll say, "Oh, I know of them. I've never heard of them before." What about the prophets? Do you know any prophets from any of the prophets that came before? And do you know any prophets? What prophets do you know that Islam thinks are important? Abraham is probably the most important. Moses and Abraham are the two big ones. They really like those. Like Moses because of the law, and then like Ibrahim because they celebrate Eid al-Adha and they celebrate all that. Yeah, they do. He's not one of the main guys, but he's in the realm. I actually have seen some stuff written on him. It's kind of weird, but yeah, they do. But what about Adam? We don't think of Adam as a prophet, really, for us, but for him, he's a prophet. So we can go with that. Say, all right, well, what about Adam? Do you know anything about Adam? And they'll say, oh yeah, he's the first guy. And then they'll tell you some random facts, like, this is really weird, but you'll hear it, so don't laugh. I'm giving you prep. They'll say, yeah, I know Adam. Well, he died. Well, what happened to him? Well, he was kicked out of heaven, and then I said, well, and he was kicked out of heaven because he went to the bathroom. It's really weird, but they have these beliefs and this thing. So you just say, okay, that's interesting. Well, let me tell you what I've read in the Torah. She said, this is what I know from the Torah. And that's true, right? You've read the Torah. You've read the Genesis. The Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible. Say, let me tell you from the Torah what I read. And they'll say, oh, really? Okay. So in the beginning, God created everything. Heavens, earth, everything. And then last of all, you don't want to draw God, by the way. I like to draw because it kind of like keeps their attention, but if you can just tell the story, that's fine. I'm just giving you both ways. But notice I didn't draw God because He's spirit and that's offensive. Should be offensive to us as Christians, but we tolerate it more. But then God, last of all, made one man and one woman. What was that? What was the first man's name? Do you know? What was it? Adam. If you can, ask questions in the midst of the story, because if you do, you're keeping their attention and it gets them involved like they're playing a part, and it takes away that preacher-esque, like, hey, let me just tell you what you're doing wrong so you don't go to hell. That don't really go over too well. So if you're telling and you're like, hey, you know this guy? Let them be involved like they know, and then they feel like they're contributing. It'll help them out a little bit, and it'll make them listen more. So Adam and then Eve. And in Arabic, they'll say, oh, you mean Hawa? Yeah, Hawa, that's it. And so they had a good relationship with God. I am perfectly okay with saying Allah. And I say Allah. You may not. You may say, oh, that's a Muslim. It's an Arabic word. I don't think Muslims own it. And I worked in Indonesia, and Indonesians say Allah. So so Allah, they had a good relationship with Allah. They didn't have any sin. Everything was good. They were great friends with Allah, with God. He put them in a beautiful garden, but he did tell them, look, you can eat anything you want, but you can't eat one fruit. Don't eat that fruit. If you eat that fruit, you're going to die. Well, then Satan came, the serpent. Satan came, and then he told Eve, oh, eat the fruit, it's good. So then she believed him. She ate. She gave the fruit, and then they both ate the fruit. They felt ashamed. They knew they had disobeyed God. They had just not done what God had expected them to do, and their relationship was broken. They felt ashamed. They felt naked. And soon before that they were fine. Afterward they were naked. They took leaves to cover up, to make clothes for themselves, to hide their shame. Then God came and said, Adam, where are you? He said, we hid. We did what you told us not to do. But then God did punish them. He kicked them out of the garden. They were forced to leave. But before they left, God took their clothes. He didn't take the leaf clothes. He gave them new clothes. He gave them clothes of a skin, like from an animal skin. And then he kicked them out of the garden. So this is pretty much the first story in the Torah that we know, the first man. So from this story that we know from the Torah, how many sins did Adam commit before he was separated from God? How many times did he disobey God? One, right? I mean, sometimes they'll say, well, 3. They'll start telling stuff. That's okay. But we know one. There's one direct disobedient thing that he did. Don't eat that fruit. Now, here's the thing. After he ate, when God said, don't eat that fruit one time, what was the punishment? Death. Adam did die. Eventually, his physical body died, but he was spiritually dead. He was separated from the presence of Allah because of that one sin. Now, here's what's interesting, too. The Scripture is very clear that they tried to cover their shame with those clothes, with those leaf clothes. But did Allah accept those really? I mean, were those clothes sufficient to cover their shame? I don't think so. He didn't say, hey, those leaf clothes are really great. Why don't you take those before you leave? He intentionally took the skin of an animal. The Hebrew word's really clear. I've asked an Israeli myself. It's really clear. He took the skin of an animal. If to get a skin of an animal, what has to happen? Something has to die. And so what we know is this very clearly. They can't cover their own shame. God had to cover their shame, and it had to be His way of covering the shame, and it did require sacrifice. So this is the very first story. And then God even said, I'm going to send someone that will destroy Satan and deliver you from this death, from this sin. So then I would ask them, say, so Rafiq, what are you doing to cover your own shame? What are you doing? How are you covering your shame right now? And then almost every time, well, I go to mosque, I say my prayers, try not to smoke. I said, well, but have you done one sin? Yeah, I do a lot of sin. Every time. So, okay, well, brother, let me just tell you, I do know the way to have that sin forgiven, and it's through the blood of Christ. So Isa al-Masih came to the earth, came down, God in the flesh came in Isa. He lived a perfect life. And then He died on the cross and rose again. Because just like Adam had to have his sin covered by the skin, by blood, it has to be from the blood of Christ. This skin, this picture is only pointing us to the ultimate forgiveness of Christ. So the question is this, Muhammad or Rafiq, are you going to continue to go to mosque and do your family rituals and continue to do all these things and trust in your good works? It wasn't good enough for Adam, and Adam was a great prophet according to you, but even that one wasn't sufficient. So what makes you think with all of you and your sin you're going to do it? So what I would encourage you to do is really pray about and consider letting Christ cover your sacrifice. Let Him be the blood sacrifice. And then let them think on that. Okay? That's what I would do. I think it's scriptural. I think it's biblical. I think it's good. I've really worked through this a lot, and I think it's solid. I also think it's what we should do with most everyone, because most of the time, people have no understanding that this is the plan of God. Now, a few things I would notice is, in this present, when I was sharing this with you, did I use the word Bible? No. Did I use Son of God there? No. But did I tell you that God in the flesh came, that He was God? He is the Son of God. And if a Muslim says to me, is Jesus the Son of God? I say, yes, He is. Let me explain that. God did not have sex with Mary. But we're talking about an initial conversation with the Muslim. You need to get them, and this is what the guy says in the book, lost. The vast majority of the time, Muslims think they're okay, or at least no one knows they're going to heaven, but they're okay with their religion, and they've got a shot with Islam, but they don't really know how sinful they are. There's this irony that when they go into the mosque, they roll their their pants leg up so they don't get dirty, and they're washing and washing and they're washing. And almost always, me and my friend Will, after this, once they see, no, your sin's bad. Like you don't understand. Like, you're going to die. Where is Adam? Where's Muhammad? Death is coming. What are you going to do about it? And Isa is your only shot. Like they couldn't cover their stuff. You got to do it. So stay away from these words, I think, in the initial that will keep you from getting to them seeing how sinful they are. Get them lost. Help them see how bad they are, because they are, and then let them know the hope. Now, if you only share this, I see people we train or we work with, they'll share this and not finish it out. Well, they're just going to commit suicide at this point. I mean, they're just like, don't not finish it. Like, this is the goodness, right? This is what you want to get to, but you're helping them, okay? So, all right, guys, thanks so much.